The universe always has a plan.
Our job is not to get out of our own way.
Yeah.
Our job is to realize we are our own way. The reality is you don't look for the source of why I'm in this shape. You look at what is the choice that will circulate new energy into this form. Your comfort is simply based on how in or out of harmony. What am I willing to do today in order to make today unlike yesterday? I would say that imagination is the astral realm of spirit, where your intuition is showing you what journey you're meant to take, because of course everything in life has already occurred, and yet there's free will and predetermination. At the same time, that's another whole topic. But your imagination is the experience. Again, the human experience is I am the one in control of my imagination, and what I imagine is then what happens. And then, of course, when things don't go our way, we get down on ourselves, just like when unexpectedly good things happen, right? The cop-out is, I must have created it, right? I must have, because it was good, and everyone wants to feel good about themselves, which is wonderful and amazing. But I think that we understand that imagination is not, it feels like it's our personal doing, and as the oneness of spirit, it is our doing, but on a personal level, what we think we are creating in our minds is actually, again, we live in a world of polarity. So what we think we're putting out as a conceiving creation is actually a download, a foreshadowing of what's already awaiting our arrival. So the law of attraction to me starts with being in tune with our intuition and knowing that it's not me imagining what I create, but remembering what I'm already meant to encounter for good, for better or for worse. So I would say our job is not to get out of our own way. Yes. Our job is to realize we are our own way. Woohoo! Which means we are huge. Each of us are our own path. Now, everything's going to unfold perfectly. Now it's going to be with your participation. Now the choice is I can choose every step of the way to think I can screw it up. And that choice is going to give me a certain quality of experience, or I can believe everything is perfect no matter what I think and say. And that's going to give me a certain quality of experience. So there are things that are meant to be. What we can control, or what we choose with our freedom of will, is we determine the quality of our experience. I determine whether I am going to be fearful. I determine whether I'm going to be trusting, 50-50, half and half, maybe a combo plate of two of those things. I decide what the quality of my experience is, and at a certain point of view, a certain level of consciousness, we realize, of course, it's not the things that happen to me that define how I feel, but the way that I choose to see it. And so, one could believe I'm capable of screwing it up, but then the question becomes, is that point of view, first of all, does that point of view feel good in your body? And if it doesn't feel good in your body, that's your body saying that's not going to contribute to you having the highest quality experience of it. So, of course, coming from what I teach, what I would say is that the mind, just like anything else within us, when the mind is like an alarm clock, right? When the monkey mind, as you said, when it's active in thought and doubt and scarcity and whatever the program is, think of that like an alarm clock. And when the mind is making noise, that's like a child saying, may you direct your breath and your love to this noisy machine, because the mind is only as noisy as the heart is unintentionally closed. So the mind's job is to make noise when the heart is shutting down. And as we send love to our mind, the heart opens back up and we reground ourselves in present moment reality.
What you have to become aware of is not so much the thoughts, but the fact that you're having so many thoughts.
Sure. And I would say, again, the mind's job, one of the mind's jobs, is to become noisy when it's time to love yourself. So if we can say, okay, when I'm lost in thought, when there's a lot of thoughts, or when I find myself just being doubtful and negative, right? That means, oh, maybe I should send some love to myself and open back up. Now, on a bigger level, within the human body is all experiences, all dimensions, time and space, all beings. So on a bigger level, your heart is only closing down when the world within your body needs love at the moment. You send love to yourself, that opens your heart back up, which then simultaneously sends energy to all people, places, and things. So on a much bigger level, we're not really even on a personal journey. We are the embodiment of divinity who only stops to love themselves to send blessings to all the prayers that are sent to divinity. Your consciousness or your higher self or your soul, how you want to refer to it, is if you start to engage in an activity, but you're not engaged in the activity in a way that creates greater alignment with your highest consciousness. Like, for example, the way we come out of alignment or out of balance is, the way I describe it is we start to exceed the speed limit of consciousness. We start to move faster and further than where our body needs to be. And so we're speeding through our journey.
Is this like we rubber band back?
Yeah, and so what happens is that your higher self or your soul basically says that activity is not helping them to come into alignment and slow down and take their time. So literally, it's as if the resolution that we set literally gets deleted out of our subconscious mind. So if we want to stick to a resolution, whatever the resolution is, someone says, I'm going to go to the gym, I'm going to meditate more, I'm going to do more charity, whatever it is. Whatever the resolution is, as long as you set an intention that I intend to let whatever my resolution to be an opportunity for me to take my time. May I move just a little bit slower than normal each day. May I talk just a little bit slower. May I breathe just a little bit slower. May I listen just a little bit deeper. And when we really deconstruct what it means to take our time, what we tend to see is that in the beginning, we are doing something different in a way that, while in the beginning may inconvenience the ego, is breaking apart the energy of stagnation to circulate new energy into your energy field. And if we want to talk the real law of attraction, the real law of attraction is different choices circulates new energy into your life, and how often you circulate new energy into your life by the different choices you make brings about different experiences that were always destined to be, but will show up in your life at the speed and rate at which you, with your choices, invite variety in.
This is sounding like a nutritional smorgasbord. The more you can get in, the better. And it's also sounding like the more you can spend some money to bring more money in to get that flow going.
That's one way of circulating, absolutely. But there are so many ways of circulating, even if it were, for example, like I'll give you a funny example. There was an episode of Seinfeld that demonstrated the opposites.
That's exactly what I was thinking earlier. Yes. Costanza, yes.
Yeah, where he says, if I make choices opposite of George Costanza, I'm going to have experiences opposite of George Costanza. So he instead of tuna on toast, he orders chicken salad on rye. Instead of coffee, he gets tea, and all of a sudden his luck turns around. So, now that's exaggerated.
He goes from being a quote unquote loser, you could say, to end up working for the New York Yankees, right next to the president of the company.
Absolutely. And there is a great amount of truth to that. The problem with the old law of attraction is that people are trying to attract specific outcomes, which creates an attachment to outcome. What we are looking at is indirect manifestation. So indirect manifestation says, if I'm having a feeling or I'm visualizing a certain reality, it's because it's already been created in time and space. And the way I bring it to me, in whatever way it's meant to bring it to me, is I have to circulate new energy into my life. Again, the other tactic on spirituality is people find the blockages and they're trying to get rid of the blockages instead of seeing that you can't get rid of a pattern of stagnation. You can only create a new pattern of circulating energy, and a new pattern of higher vibrating circular energy.
Example, please.
Okay, so an example is, instead of someone, like you talked about going to the gym, right? And so let's say someone goes to the gym because they feel like they're out of shape. The traditional spiritual approach will be like, what happened in my past that causes me to not feel good enough about myself to get out of shape, or whatever the judgment is. The reality is you don't look for the source of why I'm in this shape. You look at what is the choice that will circulate new energy into this form. And the answer is cardiovascular exercise circulates energy on a physical level. Saying I love you to the one who doesn't feel worthy or who hides in the imbalance form circulates energy on an emotional level. Going and exercising circulates energy. So we're not looking at what's the reason for the problem. We're looking at what are the new choices I can make that brings the solution to life. And so it's always about a circulation of energy that is created by making new choices. It's literally as if the universe will start paying you and rewarding you with miraculous aligned experiences at the rate at which any area of your life invites a certain amount of variety. Just like with food, we rotate throughout the seasons. So if we find in our lives the areas where are we doing the same old thing, and if there could be a resolution for 2016, perhaps the objective, while taking our time, is simply answering this question: what am I willing to do today in order to make today unlike yesterday?
You're accelerating the movement of energy, which is carrying you on your path, but maybe carrying you a little bit faster. It's almost going slow to go fast here.
That's right. So absolutely. So we're making different choices. And for a lot of people in society, making a choice to do things slowly and take their time is how they're going to accelerate the speed of their vibration. So it's like by making different choices, we fast forward the DVD of our movie, of our life's movie. Absolutely. So everything's meant to be, whether it happens in this lifetime, over 1,000 lifetimes, is up to our decision of how we wish to accelerate this. And people will say, well, I don't know how to accelerate this. By just doing different things. For example, I'm always looking at my life, and I do it in a very humorous way, to do different things just for the sake of humor. Like, today I usually put my left sock on first, then my right. So you know what? Today we're going to reverse the order. Every couple days, I switch where I sit on my couch in my home. I have DVDs or on Netflix, right? For the longest time, I would go on Netflix. I would choose things in my queue of one day I'm going to watch it. And I realized I go on Netflix, I save movies, and I never watch it. So then I gave myself the spiritual practice of every night I watch one of those movies, and I'm circulating energy. It's just like for people who declutter their space. It's just like people who have ceremonies and rituals. Everything that we're doing on a certain level is because as souls, we know about the principle of circulating energy. We just haven't become conscious of it. Once we're conscious of it, you wake up every morning and you go, my God, each moment of today is an opportunity to just make it unlike yesterday. And it's like I'm totally conscious that I'm living in a video game that I'm always destined to win. Even if the challenge for people is not just how do I make today different than yesterday, but even just with your point of view, can I actively look for what's different? Even if, let's say, you have an experience with your loved one, another fight, or I have another moment where I'm doing the same old thing. What's different about it? And what's really interesting is that life gives us something that always proves what's different. The proof that life gives us, it's as if life is insisting and trying to demand silently that this is different from any other moment in time, is the time on the clock and today's date.
It's always different.
It's always different. Like even if you had a self-defeating thought, but I've never had it at 10:48 on this date and time, therefore it's different. And if you always look for what's different, you will start to circulate energy on all levels of consciousness, and then you will have fresh thoughts, inspired feelings, and a new way of being with life. See, I think what a lot of people do is they're trying to resolve why things keep staying the same, instead of realizing that things are only the same until we choose differently, choose how to see it differently, choose how to nurture and love it differently. And in order to build up the equity to make really bold choices, that on some level only we will know is good for us, again, the choice we make is, may I love myself more instead of less each and every day. Let the choice be, may I become more kind to myself? Mm-hmm. May I be more loving with myself? May I first be more patient with myself? Because we must first be those things to ourselves before we can be those things to others. So however I want the world to be to me, may I try to be that for myself. However the past wasn't to me, may I give those gifts to myself. However, if I look at the world and I see atrocities, I ask myself, what is the opposite of what I am seeing? If I'm seeing violence, what's the opposite of violence? Peace. May I be deeper peace for myself. May I be for myself what the past couldn't be for me. May I be for myself what others in my life can't be for me. May I become the opposite energy of what I see in the world. May I love myself more, not less, and may I take my time every step of the way. One of the barriers to spiritual evolution is this constant thought that an experience we're having isn't the way it should be.
Thank you.
Right? So let's say you wake up one day, you're excited to write, and it's upgrade day, and you get frustrated. If the ego is the one leading the way in your perception, you're going to think, I shouldn't be frustrated. What can I do to not be frustrated? Because frustration is in the way of my preferable or most preferable experience. Whereas from the perspective of whatever rises, love that, frustration is what has come up in us as a result of our change of plans in life. We wanted to write, now we're upgrading, and the change that we weren't perceiving or expecting creates a sense of frustration. So from the perspective of heart-centered consciousness, frustration only arises as the next one in line to be loved. You don't love that you're frustrated. You accept that the inner child within your heart is giving you the chance to make peace with frustration and to love all the different versions of you who have ever been frustrated throughout your life, that have never been loved and held as they wanted to be unconditionally loved. So the invitation is that even when we're frustrated, and of course the instinct is, I don't want to be as frustrated as I am, can we see it as an opportunity to love the frustration in our hearts as a way of like going back in time and consoling all the versions of ourselves that were frustrated throughout all dimensions, time and space, and being able to give the frustrated part of ourselves the love it never received, as if to update our consciousness in present moment time and to heal ourselves as never before.
You gave meaning to the experience.
You have to, because oftentimes what prevents people from healing and transforming, and I say this because I work with so many beautiful heart-centered beings on a daily basis, is that they are deferring meaning to a future pending moment that meets their preferences. And of course, what's happening in the journey of surrender is the things that create frustration, inconvenience, pain, and boredom are coming up and saying, we know that your greatest meaning is beyond us. But in order for you to enter that gateway beyond us, you have to give meaning to us. And, that's a really, really deeper journey where who's willing to give deep meaning and to find evolutionary benefit and to find some form of benefit, tool, moment of growth when they don't feel the way they want to feel. See, that's when we know the difference, whether we are being run by our egos or guided by our souls.
I'm comfortable. And when I'm comfortable, that's not when, in my understanding, all of the learnings take place, because there's less of a motivation to move from the couch.
Absolutely. Now, I'll tell you an interesting story about my life. If I go back to when I was a child, any toy I wanted, I got. Any Nintendo game I desired, I manifested through my parents. Right. I didn't manifest it. My parents bought it for me, right? Yeah. But as a kid, as a little soul in training, you think you're manifesting. I wanted a bike. I got a bike. I wanted a skateboard. I got a skateboard. I wanted to go to Disneyland. I went to Disneyland. I wanted to go on this trip. I went on this trip. Anything I wanted to try, any hobby I wanted to, start and never finish. My childhood is a reflection, and my life is a reflection of everything I've ever wanted if we think of it just like as objects. I've always received, and I've received amazing graces and blessings that I never could have imagined. But here's the funny thing. Throughout my life, I got everything I wanted, and I never knew comfort until the depths of my spiritual journey. So I had everything I wanted, if you want to check it off the list of how we look at things as kids.
I'll put it in air quotes here then. Everything.
Air quotes, yeah. But I was never comfortable. And throughout my life, it was very strange that I would collect Nintendo games. And then it would just be things that collect dust. I would have a toy chest full of toys. And I'd have so many toys that to pull them out and to play with them would just give me more things to put away, and I wouldn't even do it. So what I realized when I was a child, of course you realize this as an adult, not when you're a kid, is you realize the pitfalls of object consciousness, that you can become a collector of any object. You become the collector of experiences. You can certainly become the collector of spiritual insights and be the collector of spiritual experiences. And from one spiritual high, you're chasing the next biggest high. And yet in my life, none of that made me comfortable. And I only found myself being comfortable when I was able to find myself being completely content with less. And so what I find interesting about the teachings that I offer is that, I tend to teach in a very simple way, and yet the energy and the insights are very profound. Because the profound nature of it is that the deepest teachings can go in so deeply when we allow ourselves to just contemplate and receive far less. So as an adult, versus when I was a child, who I had every toy in my room, never enjoyed them. Every Nintendo game, rarely played them. As an adult, I don't live like a minimalist, but I have so little things. And each and every one of them is a treasure, and my life is of absolute comfort. And of course, what we all learned on the spiritual path is that comfort isn't based on the things we acquire. It isn't based on the experiences that we collect. Certainly isn't based on the relationships we're with, even though it's lovely to feel loved by your beloved partners. That your comfort is not based on how anything seems or appears in your reality. Your comfort is simply based on how in or out of harmony you are with reality. And the determining factor of how in harmony you are with life is dependent upon how open your heart is, which of course is why Whatever Rises love that as like a step-by-step guide to help people open their heart so they can find the comfort, they can find the harmony, they can find the alignment to be at peace with life no matter how it appears, instead of just being on a never-ending collecting spree.
How do we begin to discover, and if that you would say is the first step, and figuring out where to go?
Sure, I think it's a great point, and I think it's great to start people with, before you know what you're here to do, you have to know who you are. I think a lot of people, and I can speak on this because I had this experience when I was very young, as an adolescent. I did not know who I was, and I thought, I'll know who I am by the things I accomplish in life. Or once I find the thing that gets people to like and validate me, then I'll know who I am. And then, and so many of us fall into that pitfall. And I always use myself as an example so that everyone can just find themselves in that journey and find what's true. But in my life, I had mixed up life purpose with the popularity contest. And what I think is important in helping people find their true purpose, as you said, is start with, who are you? Now, the question is, how do you figure out who you are? And so just like I was saying, how when we're going through spiritual detox, we have to just sit with ourselves and be still. The question we can ask ourselves is, who are we to ourselves without any feedback or validation from anyone? In other words, who are we when no one is looking?
That's a scary question for people.
It's a scary question. And just to give some peace to the process, if someone listening to this asks themselves, who am I when no one is looking? And they get this really strange, I don't know. The beauty is that I don't know who I am. Not knowing who you are is actually the first step forward of knowing who you are. Because to not know who you are based on that question means you are now stepping outside the reference points of your ego structure. You're not defining yourself as the character who is seen by this person or is validated by this person by what they do for them. So when we don't know who we are, and oftentimes when we go through spiritual awakening spontaneously, we thought we were this character in relationship with this person, having this job. And it's like you wake up and all of a sudden the script of your life gets thrown out the window and you're in an improv and you don't know who you are. And so the first step of awakening out of ego consciousness and into the heart-centered consciousness of your soul's reality oftentimes is displacing you out of your reference points or in a moment called confusion. And if we can learn that when we're confused, when we don't know who we are, the question is, can we relax our body into confusion? Our mind may not know where to go. Our mind may not know what to rest in. But if you can let your mind just spin in confusion and relax your physical body and just relax into, it's okay that I don't know who I am because now the possibilities are limitless. The I is not necessary. But let's use a little visualization. Let's use a symbol and let's see something really interesting. So let's imagine a capital letter I.
Yeah.
Right? Most people live in the I am doing this, I am doing that. It's I. It's because of I and all that stuff. We just talked about the I is not necessary to do all this. But if we look at a capital letter I, can we also see that it's a Roman numeral 1?
Absolutely.
So we can't actually tell the difference between when the I is the I and when the 1 is the 1. And so what if we were to look at this symbol that is both a capital letter I and a Roman numeral 1? And we would actually see, oh, it's always been a Roman numeral 1. I have just thought of it and perceived it as an I. So the reason why the I is not necessary is because it's the Roman numeral 1 who's doing everything within all moments. As if God is just wearing a Halloween costume, and the Halloween costume has been given the imagination and power to believe it's doing something. When in fact it was always the force underneath doing it all. So the 1 does everything. The I is just the way in which the 1 imagines itself.
Why did we sign up to come to the Disneyland of higher consciousness?
If I gave you the Zen answer, I would say because we did.
And I'll clap for you with one hand.
Yeah, which thank you, which is it's a lovely clapping method. But the most loving reason why we came here because we desired this experience. We were already our divinity in heaven. We were already one with all that is. But the greatest thrill ride is for the one that is one with all that is, to know all of itself as an individual. So we came to this planet, we came to this Disneyland, we came here because the gift of individuality is among the highest commodities of experience in all of the universe. And of course, when you come here and you forget who you are as source, and you're going back through that remembrance and evolutionary process, it's easy for one of the greatest gifts in all of existence to be seen as a curse or a prison sentence. But that is just simply our trajectory of like a phoenix rising out of the ashes and ascending into the higher vibrations of our true self. And so the more we expand in our heart, the more we love what arises, the more we ground into the body, the more we're being with ourselves, the more that we are resting in, I don't have to control it all in order to enjoy it all, the more we are in harmony with the universe, the more we see each moment as a gift and an opportunity, and we use those opportunities in our lifetime to become the work of art, to become the highest self, to become the master in physical form that we've always been destined to be. It's always important to let the universe know what you want. It's equally as important to know that what you want may not be the best thing for you. So if you cannot, and so some people take one side or the other. They put out what they want, and they're trying to make everything in their life into what they want under any means necessary. And they're too aggressive, and it's too out of sync with harmony. Some people are in sync with harmony, saying life knows the greatest good for me. Life always brings me what I need, so why state what I want? and they're coming from a place of disempowerment and insecurity and inferiority. They think they're surrendered, but they're not participating unless they state what they want. So the balance of all this is I state what I want. I put out all the things that I'd want for the universe to give me, whether it's going to personally affect your livelihood, which is fine, or whether it's going to, uplift the livelihood of the world, which is the intentions I set for each book I write. And the agreement is the universe always needs to know what I want. And equally so, I always want to know what's in my greatest good. And so whatever comes my way will be the response of the universe that says, we hear what you want. We're always going to give you all of the things that you desire, but we're going to give it to you in a way that assists in your evolution and helps you become the greatest version of yourself that you'll ever be. So again, always state what you want. Always accept that whatever you get in return is always the thing you need in order to evolve the most. Even if not getting what you want upsets you the most, can the upset you feel be seen as the next version of yourself that's in line to be loved as never before? And again, it takes a really surrendered soul to be able to see that kind of dance and not get into the ego swirl of, I asked for what I wanted, life didn't give it to me, there's people around me who have more than I have and they don't deserve it, that's unfair. We go into victimhood. Versus what surrender is about is, yes, it's important for me to know what I want and even to ask for what I want. And yet what I receive in return is perhaps more important and more beneficial for my growth, whether it matches my desires or not. And again, most people can't jump there. It's the heart-centered path and loving what arises that prepares you to live at that consciousness. So I'm not saying this as if people should jump to that place. I'm saying that as that's the mentality we aspire towards, and it's loving what arises, which is the path of heart-centered consciousness. In my book, Whatever Arises, Love That takes people through the process to actually access that kind of mentality and consciousness.
It's amazing. What we think of as negative energy is just energy that's been stored in our cells, repressed, and hasn't been given room to express. And we commonly call that negative because when we experience this energy synthesized through our nervous system, it feels very uncomfortable. So it's very common to think of repressed energy as negative or dark because we're just experiencing the discomfort of lodged energy becoming unlodged. And of course, positive energy is the same energy, but it's what it feels like to your nervous system when it's in a flux of being free flowing. So whether it's flowing or blocked, that's what gives the human mind the belief of it being negative or positive. And of course, when a human being has a lot of stuck energy, they tend to have a very narrow mindset, rigid belief system, and limited conclusions about the world in view, which is just trying to bring them to the internal realization, I've got a lot of repressed energy. How can I move it? How can I relate to it? How can I love it? How can I accept it? And so really this is, in a nutshell, no matter what stage of awakening we're at in the planet, this large, potential of quarantine is giving each of us an opportunity to say, no matter where we are in the spiritual journey, can I take this opportunity to go deep within myself and not react to what the world isn't providing me or it's being taken away from me, but can I actually discover an entire new reality nowhere else but within the depths and core of my eternal being? Harmony is simply what happens in our perceptions and our conclusions when our energy is flowing. So we have to look at what are we doing with our lives right now that is contributing to our energy being stagnant, and what are we going to do that's going to help us to circulate new energy. So for example, if you are someone who typically reads a lot of books, maybe this is a chance to kind of put that aside and switch to the opposite side, which is creative artistic expression. If you are someone who is constantly having to run around and do so many things and has an endless list of demands and things on your to-do list, maybe this is a time to nourish, replenish, recharge, make time for meditation, maybe draw yourself a bath. If you're someone who is constantly needing to always connect and converse with other people, maybe this is a chance to kind of work a different muscle and go inward and have a gratitude journal. And so we really look at, how can I interrupt the normalcy of my patterning? What are the things that I know are good for me that I really want to make time for that I've never really gotten around to? And what are some of the habits that seem to get in my way that I can maybe surrender, release, and let go? And so this is a really great opportunity. And for, I think it's this Thursday is the beginning of spring?
Yeah, it's coming up fast.
So why not use as an opportunity for a little internal spring cleaning? And we spring clean, hopefully, not just in our external realities, but we spring clean in our conditioning, in our patterning, in our mindset, and in our choices. And so the question becomes, what are the habits, the tendencies, the patterns that I do on a daily basis that are contrary or contradictory to my highest state of well-being? And what are the things that I know I could be doing for greater balance that I never make enough time for? Can we just do a little bit less of the things that are self-destructive? And can we do a little bit more things that are more exploring? That's a new word, self-exploring. Can we do things that are going to help us ground our energy, that are going to open our hearts, that are going to help us be in tune with our inner artist? Can we write more? Can we dance more? Can we spend more time with our children? Can we take more walks in nature? And for all of us, it's going to be a different combination. But I think if the prescription for the planet is, can I use this as an opportunity to detox from the choices that are actually contributing to my stagnant energy? And can I do some of the newer things that are going to create more flow in my energy? When we do those things, we activate the power of alchemy. We activate the power of alchemy. We are melting barriers within ourselves, and we are transforming our being out of the density of these seemingly separate characters, and instead coming into the fullness of who we are as light beings in physical form.
How can we do one thing differently each and every day? And
Yes.
Now we get to do things massively differently.
Yes.
What would you say to people, though, who are listening, who are going, this is great, it's a time to grow inside? You said self-exploring. I'll use the term here, intronaut. We get to become astronauts on the inside. But what if I just lost my job? What if my mom and my father is sick? What if something that we're saying universe has a plan, but on a very real level is extremely challenging?
Absolutely. The first moment of true meditation is the moment in which the ego says, this is not the right time for this. Most people need to sit in a meditation hall for a couple hours before they get, or maybe 10 minutes, or maybe just 3 minutes without their cell phone, in order to get to the feeling of, this isn't the right time for this. As soon as you get the message of this isn't the right time for this, that's on a soul level, that's actually the perfect time to start meditating. So we have to realize that one of the first steps in spiritual evolution is that the things that someone like me is suggesting is going to, when it's coming at the most ripe opportunity, to your ego, it's always going to sound the most irrational. So if I say, let's just sit and be, and someone goes, I can't at a time like this, that's how we know it's perfect. Because we have to be able to put ourselves in the position that says, my ego is going to be in various states of fight, flight, freeze, fawn. These are the new ones. And I'm going to sit and see what happens when I observe these impulses within me. But I sit and I refuse to act upon them for specific periods of time. And what that does is it gives us space. It gives us space from these impulses. And instead of living as these wind-up toys of exaggerated survival, we realize, we wake up out of the matrix and we realize, I am on my own path. I seem to share space with a bunch of people in the world, but we're literally each on our own paths, being guided by a universe that is always destined and designed to give each of us exactly what we need in any given moment. And even when what the universe gives us is a chance to experience what happens when everything is taken away, the one thing that can't be taken from us is our awareness. but it requires a certain amount of focus, dedication, and practice in order for that awareness to be the most priceless gift in the universe that any of us have. So it's as if there's this priceless work of art, this priceless gift, this most intangible of infinite value force within us. And we just have to ask ourselves, are we willing to do whatever it takes to bring this infinite power to life? And if we are, this is the most perfect opportunity to dive into awakening. Because like I said, the moment a spiritual invitation is being given and the response of the ego is not right now, when someone's ready to wake up, they go, this is the time. And for a lot of people, in order to get into this inward place, they're going to have to play out a lot of external hysteria. But people that are rooted in their hearts, people that on some level know they were born to go through this awakening ascension process, when they hear words like this, when they feel the energy it's transmitted from, we're able to say to ourselves, despite how crazy this sounds, or despite the fact that a bunch of people seem to be running around, and instead of needing to be pulled into that as if we're missing something, the real game, the real event horizon is letting the world be in a state of uncertainty and having a seat and saying to yourself, the only way I'm going to know the plan the universe has for me, and the only way I'm going to know that there is a universe orchestrating all of this around and through me, is if I just sit and allow myself to observe instead of play out what are simply symptoms of conditioning that we have a chance to heal right now.
The universe always has a plan.
Yes. I mean, the universe always has a plan. It's just not going to be the plan that the ego creates. But the interesting thing, the illusion about the ego's plan, and I don't use the word illusion often, but the illusion of the ego's plan is the ego thinks its plan is what's going to give it everything it desires. What's interesting is that the only thing the ego's plan does is two things. Is it simultaneously only gives the ego things to chase after, and it gives the ego a guarantee to be stuck at the level of consciousness it's at, which is actually what the ego wants, because the ego is afraid of change, because it perceives change as death. Because every time any of us change, it's like we become a new version of ourselves. So if we thought of it like every time you, Michael, or someone changes, you're stepping out of a timeline and into a new parallel timeline, and you become a new version of you. But your ego is the part of you that says, but if I'm becoming a new me, the me I'm stepping out of is dying. And so every time we change, the ego experiences a minor or major death, because the ego will never know that change or even death is the doorway of renewal and transformation. So that's why in the way I teach, we love the ego. We're not here to be life coaches that educate the egos. The ego cannot understand anything other than what reinforces its own self-referencing mechanism and what keeps it at a level of consciousness where it gets to avoid the death of change. So the ego will only understand what verifies and helps it avoid the death of change. And what we are doing is we are actually transcending the death of change by seeing that change is the doorway of renewal and rebirth. And we are simply not trying to convince the child inside of us that everything's going to be okay. We are loving it through every tantrum, every negotiation. We are loving it through every uncertainty. We are loving it through every fear. We are saying, honey, I cannot explain this to you, but my love will help you see this through. And it will feel like part of you is dying. And at the same time, if we can really just feel into it without the need to draw conclusions, to fight this, to run from it, if we can really just be with this process and know that something really radical and beautiful is happening, what we actually start to see is that, yeah, there is an old self, an old world, an old humanity dying, but there is a new world being born, and it's being born not outside of me. It's being born within the depth of my heart. And as we love ourselves more, not less, we have an opportunity to step forward in this moment of uncertainty as the new and the first citizens of this new earth, of this fifth dimensional vibration of unity consciousness, where when we come out of this seclusion, we come out of being sequestered, we are going to come out as new versions of ourselves. And if we go willingly, and if we make it our choice to change before life has to do it for us, it's going to be a lot easier, and it's going to be a lot less tumultuous if we say, I see where this is going. There are parts of me that are not going to continue. Part of me is going to feel like I'm dying. And yet the majority of me is going to experience renewal and rebirth. And all I have to do is learn how to live a life of alignment, notice the signs of when life is asking me to stop and breathe, to love myself, to remember what I'm grateful for, what am I doing right, what do I want to see in the coming days for the world, and what is my intention, and what am I giving to others, not just waiting to receive from others. We learn to live a life of intentionality and alignment and loving the most desperate parts of ourselves through this evolutionary process. We come out the other end fully awakened and initiated spiritual warriors and masters for the emerging new world.
What exactly is the ego?
A very simple explanation is just like a child is an adult in training, so to speak. I like to think of the ego as the soul in its most dormant phase of incubation. The spiritual journey is often a journey from the ego to the soul, but in the old spiritual paradigm, it was always thought of as two separate things. And while they're two separate realities, they're actually two aspects of the same true nature or truth. So within us, just like a child hopefully grows up, matures, and becomes an adult, the ego goes through a journey of expansion. Mm-hmm. And through the spiritual journey of expansion, where we spiritually evolve and we open our heart, the ego integrates into the light of our presence. And what comes to life is the maturity of a fully embodied soul, which is the exact process of the book I wrote. And, my intention was to write a book so that everyone would have the most loving, heart-centered way of going through this process, hopefully to be the least painful as possible. The inner war, and I came up with this when I was channeling this book, Everything is Here to Help You. I came up with this acronym WAR for, the W, the A, and the R are the first letters of the three basic prime instincts of ego. So an ego, in order for it to operate in unconsciousness, has to worry, anticipate, and regret. And as long as we're spending the majority of our time worrying, anticipating, and regretting, we are, in a sense, maintaining an inner war that allows the ego to lead the way instead of allowing the ego to unravel and surrender so the soul can shine through. So really, in this book, Everything is Here to Help You, I teach how we can unravel the worry, anticipation, and regret, bring the inner war to a close. And of course, we do that by reversing the word war, and we find raw. And raw being the most open, vulnerable alignment of our soul's highest truth. And raw is respect, acknowledge, and welcome. So what we find is as we take the time to respect, acknowledge, and welcome our way through each moment, we unravel the worry, anticipation, and regret that allows the ego to surrender and the soul to shine through without being at odds with ourselves. And of course, to be done in the most loving and thoughtful way.
How do we start this process?
Well, the first thing we do is we take time to realize that fundamentally, every single moment was only created to help us evolve out of ego and into the soul. So fundamentally, we accept the gift that everything is not circumstantial, everything is purposeful, and while it may not fit the terms and conditions of what we wish it to look like or act like or be, everything is here to help us shift out of the inner war and to embrace the raw qualities of our soul when we're willing to accept and receive everything as a gift of evolutionary benefit.
But when fears come up in other areas of our lives and we're getting warning or told that this is going to be a growth experience, does the evolved soul say, kind, gentle, easy, good, but let me step forward into that experience?
It's interesting because sometimes, depending on our alignment with the universe, sometimes you can have a conversation with the universe and just set an intention and say, look, universe, I know this fear is telling me that I'm going to go through a massive amount of healing in this experience. Please be as gentle and merciful with me as possible as I equally allow my greatest openness to receive this gift. So if we are willing to receive moments of transformation as a gift,
yes.
If we are willing to show up, then equally so, the universe is equally as likely to make it as clear, graceful, and merciful as possible. So it is our willingness to step forward in life, to know that if there are any fires in the direction we're headed, it is only the universe guiding us through the fire to burn away only what's no longer needed. And out of the ashes rises the phoenix of our fully embodied soul. So if we're willing to step forward and not be concerned about the fires we have to walk through, it is of the universe's highest importance to make sure we're ushered through that doorway as swiftly as possible.
The wisdom of anger, or anger as our ally.
This was a particular one I really loved channeling when I wrote it, because, when I was writing the book and I would come up with the different things I was going to talk about, how everything's here to help you, and go, okay, the next one's anger. And then I would sit there and ask myself, okay, how is anger a gift? How is it an ally? And what happens is every human being, if you're in a human body, you're on a spiritual journey. And so when we are angry or someone's angry with us, it is feedback from our highest intelligence that is saying, whether you know it or not, you're going through a tremendous healing journey. And of course, the healing journey is waking up out of the ego and integrating into the light of the soul. And the anger in yourself or someone else is saying you are in such a deep healing journey that anger lets us know when we need to actually spend time with ourselves and when being around others is more of a distraction. And so if someone's angry with us, it's their soul showing us, here's what I'm healing and why I can't show up and be with you. Here's what I'm dealing with that causes me to not be for you what you need me to be. And when someone is angry with us, whether they get the message or not, it is the message coming to us that says those that are angry with us need space. It's kind of like anger is a soul's way of saying, my ego needs a timeout. So we politely say, thank you for sharing. Your anger is showing me that you need some time by yourself to process what you're healing, and I'll talk to you later. And so we learn to create boundaries. And I was asked a really interesting question at a retreat. And someone says, but what about holding space and helping people heal their anger? And the caveat is, if someone is angry, but not projecting it at you, you can hold space for their anger and help them heal that repressed passion. That's what anger is repressed passion. But if someone is pointing anger at you, they're basically saying, I'm so overwhelmed by this healing that I'm not able to maintain consciousness, and I really need to be by myself. And until I get that gift, I'm going to let you know that the consciousness of our interaction has come and gone, and my anger, and their anger towards you is saying, I really need some space. So we can hold space for other people's anger as long as they're not taking it out on us. If they take it out on us, we create a boundary and we create space until someone is willing to treat us with respect, honor, and integrity. And if we're the ones that are angry, we have to recognize, I think I need a timeout, I think people are distracting me. I'm starting to project what I'm healing instead of releasing it. And I think I need to go spend some time with myself, embrace the aspects of self-care and self-love that I also talk about in the book. So anger is where we learn how to create boundaries. And anger is when we realize that even though I'd love to help someone heal and I love interacting with someone, anger lets us know when we really just need to be with ourselves.
What in the world is a spiritual attention junkie?
I'm trying to remember myself. What? A spiritual attention? Oh, you know what I think I said? I think I said a spiritual adrenaline junkie in my book. That's what I wrote. And what I was talking about was that on a spiritual journey, just like some people, like if they get high on jumping out of an airplane, they got to jump out of a bigger one, or they always need a bigger experience to get that high, right? So on the spiritual journey, we tend to be spiritual adrenaline junkies where we go, okay, what's the next highest vibration? Okay, I want my chakras to be open bigger. And we're constantly thinking that the bigger spiritual experience means bigger relief. That's a core belief a lot of us have, that a bigger spiritual experience means the bigger relief I'm going to have. Now, what I like to teach is that the bigger the spiritual experience, the longer it takes to integrate. Kind of like the bigger the meal you eat, the longer it takes to digest. So what we want to look at is that the subtlety of our experiences are the easiest to integrate. So from the soul's perspective, it welcomes big experiences without chasing it. And it's not always thinking that big spiritual experiences is going to create big relief, but the most subtle experiences are the easiest to integrate. And if it's the easiest to integrate, it's the easiest and fastest to embody. So part of the book that I wrote was to really teach people not just what to do on a spiritual journey, but how to actually be on a spiritual journey in a way that aligns with the soul and not the ego. How do we actually be on a spiritual journey in the most loving way, right? There's all these paths that say what to do, but who's talking about how to be on a spiritual journey in the most noble and forthright and thoughtful way? And so really, as we wake up out of the spiritual ego, we're unraveling this spiritual adrenaline junkie, not thinking that bigger experience creates bigger relief, but that the relief we're looking at is when the things we've experienced are integrated. And what actually integrates our experiences is the space we give ourselves to rest, to love, to heal, and become whole, and not chasing the next biggest high. There is a bigger perspective. There's a big picture. Life can be as big can be. But if we think of that metaphor, for example, in order to see a big perspective, you have to back up from what you're witnessing in order to see a bigger view. So the big perspective puts you at the greatest distance from what you're witnessing so you can see this grand view. When you get the closest to things, you tend to see the smallest perspective. So what's interesting is if we back up to have a big spiritual perspective, which when it happens spontaneously is wonderful, but we're actually creating such a distance between what we're witnessing that we actually feel the heartbreak of separation. When we're actually one with something, when we're so connected to it that there's no dividing you from that thing, there's no bigger perspective. There's actually no perspective. It's kind of like getting so close to the sun that you can't see its brightness because you have returned to it. You have merged with it. So instead of always trying to see the biggest perspective, what we learn in a heart-centered spiritual journey is to open up to the most intimate perspective, which is how can I become one with this instead of pulling away from it to try to see something in a fixed perspective. So again, this is just learning the ways in which we allow love to help us not just heal everything on our spiritual journey, but love teaches us how to actually be on a spiritual journey. I think one of the most beneficial things, and I'll tell you why I say this. There are a lot of spiritually evolved beings on this planet. There are a lot of people who are excited about personal growth. And of course, that's an amazing thing. And I love seeing that. But one of the things that I notice on the spiritual path is that we have this juxtaposition of being really spiritually fueled, but equally either doubtful of ourselves, ashamed of ourselves, or unsure of ourselves. And the more we balance our spiritual ambitions with authentic, heart-centered self-esteem, the more our energy field evens out, relaxes, and we actually ground back into the body instead of expand out of our body. So the easiest way to resolve this is, I think, the greatest homework assignment right now, and just in terms of this conversation and what we're creating together in this dialogue, is the greatest homework right now is each and every day, once a day, hopefully more times a day, can we focus on and acknowledge what we're doing right? Can we focus on what we're doing right instead of what we think we're doing wrong? Because to say we're doing something wrong is to undermine the fact that everything's created by the perfection of the universe to carry out our destiny and to fulfill the divine plan. So instead of thinking we're doing something wrong, what if we focused on what is right about this moment, what's right about me, and even if we respond in a way that wasn't the way we wanted to respond, can I give myself credit for being aware of how I responded so that next time it can be even better? Can we focus on what we're doing right? Because the universe is always focusing on what we're doing right. And if we're not focused on what we're doing right, now we are in a different dimension than the wisdom of our soul is trying to speak to us in. So when we focus on what we're doing right, just as the universe focuses on what we do right, now we're existing in the same dimension as our soul's wisdom. And then we feel ourselves experiencing the awakening of the soul, which is returning to the light instead of swirling in the unraveling of darkness. You can unravel the darkness forever, or you can align with the light forever. And the question is, where do we want to be? And if we want to experience the awakening of light and not the deconstruction of darkness, we have to start focusing on what we do right so we could reunite with the universe that only focuses on giving us gifts of evolutionary benefit.
Automatic writing is perhaps the most cutting-edge tool for connecting with the other side, which is why we've written the definitive guide called the Automatic Writing Experience. To find out more, simply visit automaticwriting.com. It's my favorite way to help you to shine bright. Woohoo!